safety for his special interest. Responsible regulation of alcohol or cigarettes means you can't get it without ID. That means our children are safer. Now consider that illegal black market marijuana dealers don't ask for ID and don't care how old their customers are. It's long overdue that we take a responsible position by repealing marijuana prohibition in Michigan in 2012. It will save millions of dollars in our criminal justice system every year, and it will focus police on solving real crime. Tell Bill Schuette once and for all to stop wasting our precious tax dollars on jailing nonviolent Michigan citizens. Make our children safer. Sign the petition. Vote it in. Find out more at repealtoday.org. That's repealtoday.org.
It's the big one!
Second annual THC Expo.
Starting Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, March 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Glass blowers, vendors, attorneys, contractors, hydro stores, compassion clubs, certification doctors.
More Second annual THC Expo.
Thousands of consumers.
Ride the magic paper bus to the medicating building.
Oils, hash, concentrates, edibles, seeds and clones, medical marijuana.
All available by donation.
Don't miss the VIP after party featuring Afro Man. It's the big one.
The Second annual THC Expo.
18 and up $50 at the door.
Don't miss the Second annual THC Expo.
At the legendary Rooster Tail on the River.
March 23rd, 24th, 25th.
Detroit.
Now, there were a lot of other negative effects, obviously, of prohibition. But if you look at where alcohol is in our society, I see it as very distinct from marijuana and from the other drugs. It does give us an example, though, of legalization, and I think it is frightening to look at what happens when you legalize a drug. You have a big tobacco, peddling this onto young people. They need people to start early. It's in their incentive. And last time I checked, when we legalized the lottery, that didn't solve poverty. And neither did legalized gambling. So this idea that these taxes are going to somehow get back into education, we're going to have a new education system if only we legalize these drugs, it's a farce. It doesn't happen with alcohol. It doesn't happen with tobacco. And it certainly doesn't happen with other vices. I don't know why it would also then happen with marijuana. It's a good promise, but it's not with its evidence. And I think it's very important to say, and this point is not emphasized by people who are against legalization, and that's why oftentimes I annoy the sort of anti-marijuana crowd as well, is we do have a problem with incarceration in this country. I mean, we have a problem with the fact that the U.S. leads the world after Russia and China as industrialized nation with the highest rates of incarceration. I mean, that is an issue, and that's a problem. It's a problem for state budgets. It's a human rights problem, and it's a problem certainly in the administration that we were very focused upon, and that's why we cut the mandatory minimum with crack and cocaine. That's why we've been taking, when I was in the administration, taking a lot of heat from conservative Republicans on reentry programs, and also on, and unfortunately I missed the former AG's speech today, but on, for the first time, including addiction as an essential part of the healthcare package in ACA, which was a landmark in the addiction world. We do need to reduce incarceration, and we do need to come up with much better ways for dealing with drugs on the whole in society. Right now, and this is a bit of a diversion, but I think it's important from a legal perspective. Right now, we deal with drugs really in a fashion that I would label as random and severe. If you happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing, you are caught for drugs and a lot of other things, it is you sort of can roll the dice in terms of figuring out what's going to happen to you. You get a sympathetic judge, maybe you'll get a pretrial diversion program or a treatment program. You get an unsympathetic judge, he hands you down a mandatory minimum 5 years. You're on probation and you fail your drug test for the first 5 times. Your probation officer may look the other way. The judge may say there's really no room in our county jail system to put you to jail. Another judge in the neighboring county says, you violated your probation, my hands are tied, you're getting a year. And that's certainly not the way we want to go. Obviously, if you want to deter anything, that's the opposite of what you want to do, random and severe. You need swift, certain, and modest sanctions. And that's what I've been really advocating for. The Hawaii model, Project Hope, actually does that basically with drug offenders. It asks them if they want treatment or not. If they don't want treatment, they really spend 2 to 3 days in jail for their probation violation. They're released, but they have to call a phone number every day to see if they're up for being drug tested. They have to report to the State House if they test positive. The judicial process has been wonderfully downstreamed in that it's sort of compact. You see the judge right then and there. You get your swift sentence, but it's modest. It's not a mandatory minimum. And they've seen a reduction in methamphetamine by over 75%. And many of those people didn't even go to treatment. It was the threat of incarceration. It was the threat of 2 to 3 days of jail. My wife's going to kick me out of the house if I go to jail. I'm going to lose my job. We all know the person that stopped smoking cigarettes, tobacco cigarettes, because their girlfriend was going to kick them out of the house. We all know the president, in fact, our last president, who stopped drinking, not because he went to a treatment program, because his wife said, I'm going to divorce you unless you stop drinking. Now, it doesn't work for everybody. Addiction is, and I certainly believe this, a public health disease. It's a problem. It's a health problem, and it needs to be dealt with treatment. But it's a biobehavioral problem. I mean, there are other things at play here. It's not exactly diabetes. It's not exactly heart disease or hypertension. So there are innovative, interesting ways and things we can do to lower drug use, also lower incarceration, without legalizing on the one hand and opening up markets and sanctioning that in society, and also without filling our prisons. And I think that's what is important to advocate for.
Countdown to launch. The medical marijuana
Launch commit.
radio show.
Guidance is internal. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Power clear.
The medical marijuana radio show is a production of the Medical Marijuana Radio Network.
You tuned in to that medical marijuana show. 855 Triple M Radio. Keep it legal. Keep it legal. Keep it legal. Keep it legal. Hey. You tuned in to that medical marijuana show. 855 Triple M Radio.
Folks, to be safe here, Rick Thompson's in the studio. Legislators on the phone. Get ready for a great program. It's the Medical Marijuana Radio Show.
Okay, Steve is the host with the co-host Denise. Starting at noon Saturdays every week. Yes, we keeping you legal. Legislators and lawyers, doctors and the growers. The show is for the people. Michigan medical marijuana, no hassle. We talk about anything, any issue you can handle. Call us up and let us know what is on your mind. And make sure when you do it legal every time. Hey. You tune in to that medical marijuana show. 855 Triple M Radio. Keep it legal. Keep it legal. Keep it legal. Keep it legal.
Welcome to another Medical Marijuana Radio Show. Today is Saturday. It's February 11th, 2012. I am patient, caregiver, and radio host Steve Greene. To my right is Mr. Rick Thompson. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Welcome, Steve.
Wow. It's going to be a great program. With us on the program, and incidentally today, we're going to, try it and go as commercial-free as possible. We're going to blow out our first commercial break, so studio, get ready for that. The reason being is because we've got a panel of legislators that we've managed to assemble, and we'll thank them when they come on here in just moments from now, because it was really important to talk to people in the legislature about the pending bills coming before the House Judiciary Committee. I believe it was supposed to start this coming week. I think they moved it out forward another week. So with us on the telephones this morning, or this afternoon, Democrat Mark Meadows from East Lansing. Welcome to the program, Mr. Meadows.
Glad to be here.
Representative Jeff Irwin, a Democrat from Ann Arbor. Welcome to the program, Representative Irwin.
Hello.
And also Representative Cavanagh. He's a Democrat from the Redford area. Representative Cavanagh, welcome to the program as well.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
We are so happy that you guys had an opportunity. Boy, at the last minute, we were able to get you guys to come on the program. And we want to thank you guys tremendously for taking the time, because the people in our community find this very, very important. I know this is a side issue for a lot of people. For a lot of people, they just don't understand it. And it definitely affects a limited segment of the population. However, that segment is tremendously affected by the policies issued by the state, and the way that the state conducts business under the Act has been a problem. It's been a problem for people in law enforcement. It's been a problem for people that are participating legitimately in the community. And then we've also had this problem with being mired by the people who don't want to be legal whatsoever. So we're so happy that you have a chance to talk about the upcoming bills, because the upcoming bills are actually attempting to modify the Medical Marijuana Act in a way that benefits everybody. Is this correct, fellas?
I believe that is the intent of the chairman, who has been putting together this package of bills over a period of time.
Now, let me ask you this, just off the top. Did any of you guys know much about marijuana in general before you guys started kind of checking this bill out, or trying to check out the Act itself and dive into this to try and make it better? Did you end up having to learn a lot along the way?
I would say that, you know, I'm not going to make any bones of the fact. This is Representative Cavanagh. You know, I inhaled, but...
well, you know, a lot of people did. You know,
I absolutely did not know the state that the medical benefits of marijuana. I was asked to chair a task force on medical marijuana with Representative Ken Horn. We were both asked by Chairman John Walsh, and that was in June. So I have talked to different groups for the last 6 months, and I'd have to say I'm very enlightened.
We're glad that you had the opportunity to, you know, just as a guy who has to deal with this himself, I'm an HIV patient. You know, I didn't expect to get ill with this some 15 years ago. Probably walked around it with for another 10 years before that. What I'm saying is that when this kind of situation lands from a health perspective in your lap and you have to deal with it, you do the best what you can. In my situation, vomiting was a huge problem with medications associated with this illness. I was not a member of a high-risk group, so this kind of landed in my lap and I had to deal with it. Now that I filled up, I showed up full blown in Cleveland. This is April of '97. I'm in a hospital bed next to cancer, next to people who are dying. In fact, 1 or 2 people died while I was there. This was just on the cusp of when HIV meds were coming out. Now that, and thank goodness that it happened when it did as far as the meds, because if I had been there even a couple of months earlier, I likely wouldn't be here talking to you now. Mm-hmm. But the only way that I keep the meds down and the food down is in this instance with marijuana. We've tried everything else. All of the doctors have. And this is what keeps the food down. This is what keeps the medication down. It's very expensive to replace. There's some social cost there. This isn't, my story alone. There are other people with the same story with different illnesses across the state and across the country, and we've been trying to deal with this in a way that doesn't involve our incarceration or our labeling as prisoners because we chose this alternative medicine. Do you guys have anything to say about how these bills address that, the alternative medicine issue, and how what is the impetus behind these? What are we trying to do with this set of bills? I know there's several of them.
If I may, gentlemen, Mark, Jeff?
I'll step in and say that they're not my bills. This is Jeff Irwin, but when they do come through, one of the things that I'd like to try to make sure is that as legislators we insert some language into the law that says exactly what you're saying, which is that if you've got patients who are bona fide patients and who are doing everything they can to act under the Medical Marijuana Act, we should protect those people from incarceration first and foremost. There's no reason that individuals like that should be going to jail. And we've had a number of cases around Michigan where patients have been thrown in jail despite the fact that they did everything to obey the law and had only maybe very technical violations around paperwork or something wasn't filed properly or on time. We need to protect Michigan citizens from being put in jail when they're doing everything they can to follow the law.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And, gentlemen, this is Rick Thompson right now. There's a package of 8 bills which are commonly referred to as the Walsh bills, but as we've mentioned before, Rep Irwin mentioned, there are several different authors of these bills. In previous conversations that you've had on public airwaves, you've mentioned that the package has been pared down from 8 to a smaller number. Can you give us an idea, for those listeners that may not be familiar with this, what the remaining bills might look like, their number, and when we might be able to see them considered in committee?
If I may, this is Representative Cavanagh. Yes, there were 8 bills introduced at the end of June, and like I said, we have had a task force for the last 6 months, found that some of these bills just aren't needed. They don't make sense. They're overreaching. But Representative Horn and I are going to meet with Representative Walsh to solidify what's going forward, what's not, when we're going to take testimony on what. That meeting will be this coming week, and I fully expect to roll out, I would say, 4 or 5 bills the following week. But also we found that these bills don't address a lot of problems, like dispensaries. I mean, in the middle of this, in August, the Court of Appeals said that there can't be patient-to-patient transfer where money's exchanged. I'm simplifying it. But there are people that say we shouldn't talk about or try to legislate dispensaries, and I'm of the belief if there's a problem, we should add some clarity and not let the courts, I as a legislator, believe that it's our role to add clarity and definition to laws. And I'm of the moderate viewpoint that 2/3 of our state voted to have that medical marijuana is of great benefit and it should be used for medical purposes. My onus, I asked to be on this committee because I was reading the newspapers where the police were overreaching, the judges were screaming for the legislature to add some clarity, and actually the doctor-patient bona fide relationship is my bill. And, a lot of things were pointed out through this discussion that my bill, the way it was written, might be overreaching. But my purpose on there was, I have twin daughters that are 20 years old, and they told me they know a dozen kids from their high school, just off the top of their head, that had medical marijuana cards. And we read about these mills that an out-of-state doctor can set up a hotel room and just hand out certificates. And I think that is what causes the misperception by the public. So this is to strengthen it for the patient and also give them rights for the instances that it's actually needed. And I think if we can change the public perception and maybe educate the public that there are very valid and useful reasons for this, that was my goal for being on this, is to clarify and protect the rights of the constitutional amendment that was passed.
Fantastic. Representative Meadows, we've heard from Representatives Irwin and Cavanagh previously about the kind of conversations they've had with their constituents in their office in regards to medical marijuana. The first time I have an opportunity to speak to you directly, Representative, what type of issues have been raised by your constituents in regards to medical marijuana? Are you hearing from them that there's an issue with safety, or are you hearing that there's an issue with an overreaching police force that may be putting people in jeopardy that are really sick and ill in the first place?
Actually, my constituents have come in and largely around the issue of dispensaries. And with regard to police action, I think that most people would agree that the initiative language is often confusing and sometimes contradictory internally. And so with regard to police agents, what they've asked me to do is to work as strongly as I can to clarify the language and provide some definition where definition is absent. I think that we ultimately have to move towards a permitted dispensary system in the state of Michigan. And, I know that I think Chairman Walsh actually plans on taking up these bills not this week, but the following week. And beginning a process of debate on the language of the bills. And I had a bill in the original, I think, package that, to the best of my memory anyway, we didn't end up introducing because I felt like we had to solve the dispensary problem before it would have any relevance to the issues out there. But, certainly the people of the state of Michigan have spoken. They said that medical marijuana, properly used and distributed, is to be legal, should be free from legal action, and, to the extent that there are people out there who wish to change that decision has been made. But I think that there is an appropriate place for the Judiciary Committee and the legislature to clarify the process that is out there so that we can further protect the caregivers, further protect the users, the lawful users, and address some of the issues that Representative Cavanagh has highlighted. You can go on the internet and, just plug in medical marijuana and you pop up an ad that will say, it can get you your card in 12 hours. That to me is not bona fide medical, a bona fide medical relationship, and I think Representative Cavanagh's bill addresses that. But certainly we don't want to make it harder for individuals who are appropriately diagnosed and provided a certification to utilize this medical service that could be available to them. And to go back to your first question, I grew up in the 60s. have I learned anything in this process? I've learned a lot. And I want to tip my cap while we're on the show here to Lamar Lemons, who is a former state representative who twice introduced extensive legislation to legalize medical marijuana. And we even brought in Republicans for Change from Maryland to testify 4 years ago on this issue, and we just couldn't get it going. Finally, the people had to take it and make it happen, and they did make it happen, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we don't impede what they wanted to have done in the state of Michigan.
Well, that's a fitting tribute. Thank you.
You mentioned something that struck me particularly strongly, and that's the word legalize. I think when you ask people like our Attorney General, Bill Schuette, about legalization, when you say the word legalize as it relates to our existing act, he will say, no. Nothing about this is legal. This just provides a protection against prosecution. So it's kind of a pseudo-legal. But the problem here is that if they find you outside of the protection of the act, and they really try hard to find you and describe you outside of that protection. Why they're like that, I don't know. But the fact that they want to find you outside of that protection puts you immediately into, the worst criminal ranking that you're up there with the other guys that are standing on the street corner with pagers. I'm wondering if there's any way that we can craft into this legislation the word legal for these people who have cards, and for that your possession, your use, your growing is considered legal under these certain circumstances. Because right now we don't have the word legal attached. It's just a protection, and they try and deny it to you.
Well, it's easy to craft that into legislation. There's a concurring opinion by Peter O'Connell. He's a judge on the Court of Appeals in a couple of criminal cases, which I think analyzes very well the issue, the problem with the existing language and why it's confusing. But he points out, I think both sides are right, actually. I think this does legalize use of marijuana for individuals who are certified and have purchased it in the correct way from caregivers and others. But it also doesn't change some of the language of existing statutes which criminalize this activity. And it would be simpler, frankly, to change that existing language in other statutes to provide an exception for those individuals who are certified to utilize medical marijuana. And, we don't have any bills that do that at this point in time, and I think probably, maybe Representative Cavanagh knows more about the discussions regarding this, but my guess is they thought that would be harder to do than to address the initiative language. But yes, that's a simple way of dealing with it.
Well, certainly the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act contains a supremacy clause which states that all other acts that are inconsistent or in conflict with this act are overruled by the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. So there is language already existent in law which is adopted in MCL code that states that the medical marijuana law is supreme. So perhaps all that's really necessary is just a reinforcement from the legislature of that existent statement, and it doesn't need to be nearly as complicated as everyone's making it to be. Rep Cavanagh, you've been the most involved in these discussions. What do you think of that idea?
I don't mind the redundancy and the pounding in and the suggestion that we put the word legal in there in just statute. I mean, one trouble we have with what I'm attempting to do is clarify in these bills is they have to be passed by 2/3, simple majority.
That's a big hurdle to overcome, isn't it?
Truly. And whereas if we just change some of the statutes even to say that, because I heard over and over exactly where this conversation is going, that there is the protection, but once the prosecutors are able to throw out that protection, yeah, you're treated just like the guy with a pager on a street corner. And you have no defense. And the Medical Marijuana Act can't even be introduced from that point, or it's not part of the jury instructions. I was on a radio call Thursday where they said, why don't we change the jury instructions? So, yeah, there are other avenues that we could clarify the law in a less complicated manner, and I'd be willing to look at all that as this discussion continues.
Well, looking forward to some of the response from the medical community on this. They've since the courts and, you know, our Attorney General responded in the way that they have. They put forth, they really examined this hard, and they said, how can we go back as a people and recraft another initiative so that this answers this? If this is gray to the Attorney General, let's answer this appropriately. And every time they went back and looked at it, we always found a way where the Attorney General or anybody who had a mind could just, again, classify you outside of such a protection. So they've come back and said, look, we're going to do this legalized thing. And this is the only, they figure if they take the sword away from the Attorney General or anybody who intends to use the sword, it's going to be a lot harder to hurt somebody. And so that's, I think, why you're getting this response. If to the people who would be opposed to such a legalization campaign, don't you think that there are some things that we can do with the existing stuff that would kind of give rise to a reason for that to go away? Because all of this is really just about protecting people, and generally not people who were criminals in the first place. But there is the other element, though. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are other people who would like to take this and use it in an inappropriate way, but that exists. It's really the exception rather than the rule.
I am trying to drive the conversation so that it's addressed as a community health issue versus a policing issue.
Or a criminal justice issue.
Criminal justice, yeah. Maybe have a health inspector knocking on your door instead of the police kicking in your door. And I see that as a step towards just changing viewpoints. Because right now, everybody thinks of this as a criminal justice matter.
Right.
I've had conversations with the state police that they welcome that because they don't want to answer every call that says this guy has 6 plants. So they have to show up and start counting plants.
Such a waste of resources.
Exactly. They make no bones about the fact that if, they're doing an investigation for importation of pounds of marijuana, they're not going to stop. Well, we're not asking them.
Right, exactly. Gentlemen, is there any particular thing, if there's one thing that you want to see changed about this, if you could just have one thing change about this, what would it be? Just ask all three of you. We'll start with you, Mr. Meadows. Representative Meadows, if you could give us your opinion on that.
Well, actually I co-sponsored Representative Cavanagh's bill, which defines bona fide, and I think that was a mistake in the initiative language, not to carefully identify the appropriate definition for bona fide medical treatment and or bona fide medical relationship. And there is a very good, I think, explanation, actually response, because I think there's a Senate bill that Rick Jones sent out of his committee that addresses this issue too. And Cannabis Patients United talked about the Colorado language and suggested that we take a look at that. And it is specific language that came from their regulated community, not necessarily statutorily. I think that adding it in a statute is appropriate, as Representative Cavanagh has suggested. I think that language that has been put forth may need to be amended in some way, but if it's consistent with the Colorado language, then I'd feel very comfortable with it.
Representative Irwin, your opinion on that question, please?
Well, the number one thing I have to change is the Attorney General. I mean, the problem here is that we have an act that, for the most part, is fine as it is, and we have a chief law enforcement officer in the state of Michigan who is trying to pretend as though the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act was never passed by a large majority of the voters. So if there's one thing I would change, it would be the Attorney General. But to give a more direct answer as to the substance of the legislation, the one thing I think that could be useful for the state of Michigan, it would be a possible productive change to what's on the table, is to give local communities some clear direction as to what zoning powers they have around dispensaries and these issues. Basically, I think the concern that most citizens have is that they just don't want it to be a Wild West with respect to shops being able to open anywhere without any special rules, and with people being able to have very large growing operations without a lot of oversight. So I think if we put some rules in place that will give local units of government, which is where this discussion should be happening, you know, give them some tools to regulate the zoning issues more clearly. I think that would solve a lot of the problems that some of our citizens are having with dispensaries opening in places where maybe there shouldn't be that kind of business.
Rep Cavanagh, any difference on the plate for you on that question? What would you change if there was one thing you could change? If you could just have one, what would it be? Well, I do like both of Rep Irwin's answers. But me, I'm not sure it can be accomplished legislatively, and it's this enlightenment that I've had over the last 6 months of the outstanding benefits of marijuana. And I see that as a previous recreational use because that's where my mindset. And now I'm raising kids, and I'm scared that, you know, this is just going to add to whatever. But the benefits, I mean, I have talked to numerous people that were on huge opiates and reliant on those. Right. And they have completely severed the opiate use. And now just through, I mean, I never knew that it came in ointment form or, you know, edible forms outside of the brownies that were created in the 70s. Right. You know, this really has evolved, and it is a medicine. So it's an educational purpose that I hope to accomplish, and I'm not sure you can do that through legislation. But we're going to have to, as a legislature, in order to get these bills passed. Because I know there's people on the floor that have an antiquated mindset, and we're not going to make any change unless we enlighten our colleagues.
Now, I've heard you in the past, Rep Cavanagh, describe some of the different groups that were involved in the process of refining these 8 bills from their original presentation down to a smaller number, and then also correcting or changing the language that's involved in them. For there were some hearings involving, I believe, the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan and the Michigan State Police. Could you tell us a little bit about the groups that were involved in that process and how that actually eventually came about? And also, were there any cannabis patients groups involved in that process as well?
Sure. Cannabis United and various other compassionate care. I can't remember all the groups who sat down with, but basically the word spread quickly. And I and/or Rep Horn or both of us met with anyone who wanted a meeting, and that was over the summer. And then, you know, closer to the holidays, when we were really trying to hone in on these, the work group became a little smaller, and that was just to make sure that the language it was a smaller group in order to work with. And that's where we found, you know, that a lot of these weren't needed. There's a bill out there that you can't have a marijuana leaf on any kind of advertising. Well, I think that would lose pretty quickly as a First Amendment challenge. Right. And it's not really within the overall scope. And also, a lot of problems, my bill specifically is trying to define the bona fide doctor-patient relationship. And I heard about medical groups where doctors truly believe in the municipal purposes of medical marijuana. But if they were to grant a certification, we're a medical group like U of M or whatever, we bar them.
Guys, we're coming up on a break. We'll come right back. Hang on with us. We'll invite you into the phones. 810-423-2350 for the Medical Marijuana Radio Show. Hang on.
Thank you.
Michigan's Attorney General has been lying to you about the safety of your children. He's trading our children's safety for his special interest. Responsible regulation of alcohol or cigarettes means you can't get it without ID. That means our children are safer. Now consider that illegal black market marijuana dealers don't ask for ID and don't care how old their customers are. It's long overdue that we take a responsible position by repealing marijuana prohibition in Michigan in 2012. It will save millions of dollars in our criminal justice system every year, and it will focus police on solving real crime. Tell Bill Schuette once and for all to stop wasting our precious tax dollars on jailing nonviolent Michigan citizens. Make our children safer. Sign the petition, vote it in. Find out more at repealtoday.org. That's repealtoday.org.
Well, this formula is specifically to grow cannabis.
That's Ray Kogo for Kogo's Original Cannabis Formula Nutrients.
Now, everybody knows that large buds and tight buds come from genetics. and then the amount of light you use. The other part is having the correct nutrients that the plant's going to use. Mine specifically to grow cannabis, so it's going to get everything that it needs.
Ray knows what you may not. Those nutrient companies you can get in most grow shops are not cannabis specific. That means they take the stuff out of the bloom that your plant needs in bloom. You can get Kogo's original cannabis formula nutrients too. It's just 2 1-gallon jugs that make over 600 gallons of nutrients, all for less than $100. See the difference for yourself.
More trichomes, bigger buds, faster growth, and for less money.
Go to CANNABISformula.com or call Ray direct at 517-375-8998. That's 517-375-8998. Kogo's original cannabis formula nutrients.
Medical marijuana certification. And now you can find out everything you need to know online at getpotid.com. Or write down this toll-free number, 855-DOC-CERT. A friendly specialist will direct you to our Farmington Hills office. Medical marijuana certification. GetPotID.com. It's the key to getting your card. Information, resources, and in the end, if you're qualified, a medical card. Call toll-free right now, 855-DOC-CERT. That's 855-DOC-CERT. It's GetPotID.com. The patient's place for medical marijuana education and safe access is Third Coast. Beautiful downtown Ypsilanti is where you can get safe, affordable access to education and materials concerning your specific needs, and quality products designed to meet your exacting needs. It's the Third Coast, 19 North Hamilton in Ypsilanti. Convenient hours, friendly, professional, compassionate. Call Third Coast today, 734-487-5402. That's the Third Coast Compassion Center in downtown Ypsilanti, 734-487-5402. It's the big one!
The second annual THC Expo.
Starting Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, March 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Last floors, vendors, attorneys, contractors, hydro stores, Compassion Club, certification doctors.
More second annual THC Expo.
Thousands of consumers.
Ride the magic paper bus to the medicating building.
Oils, hash, concentrates, edibles, seeds, and clones, medical marijuana.
All available by donation.
Don't miss the VIP after party featuring Afroman. It's the big one.
The second annual THC Expo.
18 and up, $50 at the door.
Don't miss the second annual THC Expo.
At the legendary Rooster Tail on the River.
March 23rd, 24th, 25th.
Detroit. The Ohm of Medicine is a state-of-the-art facility in Ann Arbor where art and passion meet patience and safe quality access. Get to the place that has top-of-the-line security, atmosphere, art, and most importantly, a highly trained and caring, compassionate staff. And the convenience is clear. Ohm of Medicine is easy to get to in downtown Ann Arbor. Private, well-maintained, handicap-accessible restrooms, convenient, secure parking in 2 nearby lots with complimentary validation. The Ohm of Medicine. Log on to omofmedicine.org.
Medical Marijuana Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Medical Marijuana Radio Show for another Saturday. About 20 minutes left in the hour. Steve Greene, Rick Thompson here with you on AM 1310 WDTW, Detroit's Progressive Talk. This afternoon, progressively talking with Representative Mark Meadows from East Lansing. He's a Democrat. The Democrat Jeff Irwin from Ann Arbor, and Democrat Cavanagh from Redford. Welcome back to the show, fellas. I just wanted to give you guys a chance to talk about whatever, maybe throw it to you and say, give you an open mic for a second, each one of you. And then also open up the chance for people who are listening at home or watching us on the internet today to join in and ask a question. If you want to, it's really easy. Dial 810-423-2350. That's 810-423-2350, and you can ask a question of our guests this afternoon. I wanted to ask you also, as it relates, when we get this all shaken out, when we as a state have this kind of buttoned down to the way we like it, or at least to what it's going to be, don't you think we should be handing this to our federal legislators and the representatives of the state, say, hey, this is what we settled out of this. Here you go. So at least they're informed about what the state's doing so that when they go forward with federal legislation, they've got a perspective from which to, act on?
I'll weigh in on that, yes. I think that, anytime there's an innovative approach to almost anything, the more states that move in the same direction, it forces the federal government to react and usually to change their existing position. And in this particular case, basically, the state is determining through this legislation that it will not, prosecute someone or refer for prosecution an individual who is utilizing marijuana for medical purposes, at least as defined in the statute. because it's still illegal under federal statute. So I think to get that federal statute repealed or changed so that it reflects what the states are doing, we need some more states to adopt the type of legislation, hopefully a little better crafted, but the type of legislation that Michigan citizens have adopted.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just pretty much agree with Representative Meadows. The federal government has a history of reacting to the states. I think you've seen medical marijuana statutes pass in a number of states, and I think we're going to see some more of that in the future. And when it reaches a critical mass, I think our federal legislators will react. But certainly it's important that all of us, both us as state legislators, but also, you know, your listeners out there, communicate with their federal representatives and let them know that they'd like to see a review of our federal drug control policy. You know, the suggestion that I always like to make is that, you know, our federal government should impanel a group of medical professionals, not politicians, but medical professionals, to look at the scheduling of controlled substances in federal law and take a detailed, sober analysis of the pharmacological, toxicological properties of all these controlled substances and try to realign our controls and our sanctions in a way that logically corresponds to how dangerous these different substances are. Because this Controlled Substances Act has been loaded up over the years, you know, sort of in a piecemeal fashion. And as everybody on the call knows, it's very politically popular to be tough on crime. So over the years, you know, different substances have been added, and it's always been making the act stronger and stronger, and it's making the penalties stronger and stronger. And it's time that we take a step back, try to get some logical correspondence between the potential public safety harm and the ways that law enforcement tries to aggressively address the, you know, most difficult harms.
Hey, I just wanted to ask you, are any one of you guys familiar with how much we spend at the state level on our incarceration system, our prison system, the Department of Corrections? Do you know how much, what our budget is there? Off the top of anyone's heads, I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's about $2 billion. It's about a quarter of our budget.
About 1/4 of our budget is spent incarcerating people for the things they do wrong in our society. Is that what you're saying?
We're one of only, I think, 5 states right now that spends more on our Department of Corrections than we do on our system of higher education.
Yeah, see,
that's a real, you know, that's a real sad signal or sign as to where we are as a state.
So, Mike, I guess, and you know, looking to our Republican friends, if these are the guys that are in power, and you know, maybe trying to appeal from their standpoint, they've always been a state rights group. They've always been, they've stood for people who are wanting to minimize the amount of government, downsize government, and downsize the cost associated with it. Don't you think that reaching into that billion-dollar pie to take out the people who are nonviolent drug offenders, don't you think that that would be a good place to start? Imagine where he could spend that money in a great way instead of trying to keep somebody locked up in a cage when he's not going to hurt any other person anyway, he or she.
I've got to tell you that you know, we've been dealing with this issue, you know, ever since I was elected to the state legislature and as chair of Judiciary last session. We had concentrated on it, and you know, I'm not out here to defend Republicans, but I have to tell you that Republicans were as concerned about this particular issue that you've just raised as it seemed we were. And while we tried to find a resolution for this, it has been very difficult because, at least in last session, everything we sent to the Senate sort of fell into a black hole. And that was not because of the content of the policy legislation that we sent over there, but that was pure politics.
The
so
composition
if we
of the
could get
legislation.
beyond the pure politics of addressing issues like appropriate sentencing and incarceration, instead of as a political tool saying that you've got to be, you know, against, you know, proper police activity if you want to improve the sentencing guidelines and improve the way that we operate the correction system, then we'll get something done. And hopefully we're getting close to that point.
Well, the polarized state that we have the legislature in at this particular point makes it more difficult to get common sense legislation passed. However, you both Irwin, Representative Irwin and Cavanagh, had some great success with some other efforts that you put forth. Regarding public input in committee, how long will it be before the bills are available for the public to consider, for the public to view? Because obviously it makes total sense that an informed electorate makes decisions best, and we don't want to have any kind of an ambush situation where the bills are released to the public several days before they're being heard in committee. That should be at least a couple weeks for people to digest and decide whether they want to come down and make the public input. Can we get some kind of a guarantee from you gentlemen that that'll happen, that it won't be released to the public just briefly before it's considered in committee?
I don't think you can get that sort of guarantee from any of us gentlemen, because we're not the ones who control that process. That's a question for Chairman Walsh, and it's a question that you need to put to him.
Right.
You know, I will say up front, though, that in the time I've had an opportunity to work in the Michigan House, Chairman Walsh has run a very fair committee, and he's allowed quite a bit of testimony and debate, and I expect that he'll continue to run his committee in that way. But, you know, that's really a question for the chairman. He's the one who gets to decide the rhythm of this discussion.
You know, gentlemen, I was really, really dismayed when Senator Rick Jones, who I believe is part of the Senate Judiciary Committee, was holding hearings last year on some other bills that have
Bill
since,
17 specifically.
Yeah, a bunch of them. And when it got to the point where they were taking public input at those hearings, it was just a dog and pony show, and insulting to the people who had traveled miles and miles to come and have some short thing to say as input, as public input. I couldn't believe some of the stuff coming out of Senator Jones's mouth. Things like, asking, are you on marijuana right now? And then when they said, well, I'm a patient, he goes, that's what I thought you were on marijuana. He slams his hammer, he's like, next. So this kind of belittling and this kind of, the temper and demeanor were awful, or just aberrant. And I'm hoping that, at least on the House side, that maybe we'll have some kind of decent public input from people who are just not crackpots, but trying to have some real meaningful input.
Well, Representative Jones, Chairman Jones is one thing, and Chairman Walsh is a much more people-friendly chairman. I have to tell you that.
Guys, we got to go to break real quick. We'll be right back, and I want to thank you for being on the program. Don't go away. We'll be right back on the Medical Marijuana Radio Show. Hang on tight, guys.
Got something to say?
Call now toll free 855-MMM Radio. The Medical Marijuana Radio Network.
Michigan's Attorney General has been lying to you about the safety of your children. He's trading our children's safety for his special interest. Responsible regulation of alcohol or cigarettes means you can't get it without ID. That means our children are safer. Now consider that illegal black market marijuana dealers don't ask for ID and don't care how old their customers are. It's long overdue that we take a responsible position by repealing marijuana prohibition in Michigan in 2012. It will save millions of dollars in our criminal justice system every year, and it will focus police on solving real crime. Tell Bill Schuette once and for all to stop wasting our precious tax dollars on jailing nonviolent Michigan citizens. Make our children safer. Sign the petition. Vote it in. Find out more at repealtoday.org. That's repealtoday.org.
Medical marijuana certification. And now you can find out everything you need to know online at getpotid.com. Or write down this toll-free number, 855-DOC-CERT. A friendly specialist will direct you to our Farmington Hills office. Medical marijuana certification. GetPotID.com. It's the key to getting your card. Information, resources, and in the end, if you're qualified, a medical card. Call toll-free right now, 855-DOC-CERT. That's 855-DOC-CERT. It's GetPotID.com. Hey, Steve Greene here for the Medical Marijuana Certifications at AMMP. They're the American Medical Marijuana Professionals. You'll find them just north of Utica Road on Gratiot in Roseville. Their address is 28349. Now, call-ins are welcome, but you're better off calling for an appointment. They have a toll-free number, 877-RX-420-99. That's 877-RX-420-99.
for American Medical Marijuana Professionals. That's AMMP on Gratiot and Roseville.
It's the big one!
The second annual THC Expo.
Starting Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, March 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Last floors, vendors, attorneys, contractors, hydro stores, compassion clubs, certification doctors.
More second annual THC Expo.
Thousands of consumers.
Ride the magic paper bus to the medicating building.
Oils, hash, concentrates, edibles, seeds, and clones, medical marijuana.
All available by donation.
Don't miss the VIP after party featuring Afroman.
It's the big one!
The second annual THC Expo.
18 and up, $50 at the door.
Don't miss the second annual THC Expo.
At the legendary Rooster Tail on the River.
March 23rd, 24th, 25th.
Detroit.
The Medical Marijuana Radio Show.
One of these days.
Welcome back to the Medical Marijuana Radio Show. It is just about 8 minutes before 1 o'clock. Boy, the hour goes by so fast, you guys. It just really zooms by. I got to stop and take just a moment to put on the grandpa glasses and thank Representative Mark Meadows from East Lansing, Representative Irwin from Ann Arbor, and also Representative Cavanagh from Redford, all Democrats. Fellows, I just wanted to point out that I didn't just stack the deck with Democrats today. We invited our Republican friends to be on the program. Unfortunately, all of them were preoccupied. Thanks for taking the time at the last minute to come on and talk about this subject on the program because, like I say, for a lot of people, it's a small subject. But for the ones it affects, it's hugely impactful. It has a meaningful impact on their lives, and we're just wanting to make sure that the people get heard and that appropriate things happen in appropriate places. So we've just really generally got to thank you so much because you guys didn't have to do this. You guys don't have to stick your necks out there. You guys don't have to study this. But we want to thank you for taking the time to have a say about this.
Appreciate it. Thanks for thanking us. Hey, I want to go back to your question just before the break because I want to point out one more thing about the House Judiciary Committee. Anyway.
Certainly.
And that's that, as far as I know, and based on a conversation I had with him, the chairman plans on taking testimony and allowing people input on these bills over a 4-week period. Now, I don't know what happened with Senator Jones and his committee, but I think there's going to be adequate time provided for individuals to come in and speak about the specific language that has been introduced on these bills.
We're looking forward to that.
That's great news.
That is great
Meadows.
news, sure.
Thank you very much. And, of course, we'd like to thank both Representative Irwin for the Michigan report card. I know that you've been working with Lisa Howes, who's a representative from Detroit on that. And, of course, Representative Phil Cavanagh, you've supported no-fault insurance policies and the airport authority within your region as well. Those are efforts that are appreciated by the community and not ignored. And, of course, Representative Meadows, you've had a long history in the legislature, so we'd like to thank you for those efforts you make beyond just the medical marijuana issue itself.
By the way, go Greene. I went to East Lansing.
Right,
I love that.
Meadows.
Go right, go Greene.
That's right.
Sorry about that, Representative Irwin. I know you're from Ann Arbor. I know you're probably a Go Blue guy.
Well, of course, I'm a alum, but all that. But, we always root for little brother. We want little brother to do well. And
little brother. Slightly
I really have
okay.
I have a lot of support for the Spartans. I like to see them do well.
Fantastic.
Guys,
Representative Irwin, I think, grew up in East Lansing, by the way.
Oh, well, there you go. It's a small world, isn't it,
He's
fellas?
green on the inside, then. That's right.
We're going to try and get some of our Republican friends on the program next week. I think this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was on the Judiciary Committee's hearing schedule for the 16th. It looks like it got bumped forward.
It did get bumped forward because we had to cancel the Judiciary Committee meeting for this week.
Right.
Because of the governor's budget address.
Yes. Boy, there was a lot of stuff attached to that, wasn't there?
That's a whole other radio program, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk to you about those issues at a later date as well.
Thanks for thinking of us.
Thanks again, fellas, for coming on the program. We hope you'll keep an open slate. Maybe when, after this has been addressed and after the vote's been done, maybe we can come back and reflect on this. Would you guys be willing to come back and talk about this after the fact, looking back?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't see why not. And I just want to thank you for spreading the message to your listeners. I hope that everybody is reaching out to their legislators, letting them know how they feel about this issue, and holding their elected officials accountable on this issue and every other issue that we deal with in state government.
We love to be engaged with our legislators.
And our broadcast range reaches all the way from Ontario to Ohio, out to Lansing and Ann Arbor, and up to Saginaw. So you certainly are reaching quite a large audience with this broadcast today.
Well, and then additionally, we're on the Internet as well. We've got all kinds of places people find us on the Internet. Listening live and recorded, by the way. Okay, there we go.
But thanks again for taking part of this radio broadcast. We certainly appreciate it, and we look forward to being able to tap you as a source for later on.
All right. Have a nice weekend.
Gentlemen, thanks again. So,
thanks a lot.
Now, Rick, we got some stuff to talk about. First off, can we get this live spot out of the way? I want to do a live spot for these guys that are doing the, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Down at the Marijuana Ranch Winter Sign-Up, Winter Up Saturday, today from noon until 4:20, sponsored by Organic Man Sam's Compassion Club. Of course, there's free parking. Michael Comorn from Planet Green Trees and Richard Clement from Michigan Normal will speak, and Charmy Goulson, editor of the Midwest Cultivator, will talk about the petition drive to end marijuana prohibition. There's clinics and classes and patient ID center, free Coney dogs, lots of advantages. And don't forget about the Downriver Health and Cannabis Fair featuring the Cushberry Cup, sponsored by Puff Danny's Glass and Wyandotte and Applied Analytical Laboratory. Now, that's March 10th, 2012 from 11 to 7.
Just a couple short weeks away.
Yep, visit, and that's the Downriver Community Compassion Club booth right there for all your Michigan medical cannabis information. Dr. Newman will be available for medical consultations. Steve from the Radio Weed Show will be broadcasting live.
That's Steve and Rick, by the way.
And, of course, Joe Kidd, another local.
Oh, wait a minute, that's the 10th. You can't be there on the 10th.
I'll be doing a bowling tournament up in Lansing to support our wonderful gal Jennifer, and there'll be more information about that on the RadioWeedShow.com website. Take a look at that.
All right, and there was some more stuff here. What else you got?
Yeah, well, back at the Cushberry Club at the Downriver Health and Cannabis Fair, which again March 10th from 11 to 7, there'll be on-site cannabis testing by Applied Analytical Labs, glass blowing by Puff Danny, health and wellness businesses and member booths. Again, Dr. Newman's booth for medical consultations, and there'll also be classes on cooking with cannabis, vaporizing, tea, capsule making, tons of information there. Tickets are only $12, folks.
Okay, now we're just down into the time where, I guess it's just free plug time. You got anything to free plug?
Heck yeah. RepealToday.org. Let's end the prohibition of cannabis in Michigan. Go to RepealToday.org to find out where you can sign a petition, or also to register yourself as a petitioner, or to sign up to be a volunteer in another way. We need phone bank folks. We need folks to do a lot of jobs other than circulate petitions. So even if you're not able to physically get out and do it, you can still participate in the movement.
So on the 10th, we are going to be out there doing this live thing downriver with the Downriver Compassion Club at the VFW Hall, where the expo's happening, put on by Puff Danny and the glass exposition that he's got going on. Yeah. Now you're going to be out in East Lansing on that day doing a charity benefit for a young lady at a bowling alley, yes?
Exactly right. And there's more information about that on RadioWeedShow.com, or you can hook me up on Facebook, Rick Thompson on Facebook. You can find me. Y'all know what I look like.
Y'all know. You got to know. Hey, folks, it's that time of the day again. Good Lord. We managed to get through the program today without any crackpots, thank goodness.
I am not a crackpot.
Yes. Well, Bill Schuette, there's always time for you to come on a different program. Folks, next week we'll try and get some Republicans on to talk about this very same set of bills coming before the House Judiciary Committee. Not this week, but next. And it sounds like they're going to really iron through this.
I'd love to hear some alternative viewpoints on these issues we raised today.
Incidentally, these House Judiciary Committee hearings are going to be broadcast on RadioWeedShow.com. We've made some agreements to have that happen.
And of course, you can always participate live if you're able to get to Lansing. Let your voice be heard, and make sure you dress your best and you speak your best.
We'll see you next week on the Medical Marijuana Radio Show.
The Medical Marijuana Radio Show and RadioWeedShow.com are trademarks. Copyright 2011.
The comments, ideas, and opinions expressed in the preceding program are those of show participants only. Nothing stated in this program reflects the ideas, opinions, or beliefs of this radio station and/or Clear Channel Radio.
Identify yourself.